Have you ever noticed that? How so many religious stories, even from cultures that are thousands of miles and years apart, often sound, well, kind of the same. Today, we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating academic argument that this isn't some cosmic coincidence, but actually a key feature in how successful religious movements are built.
I mean, think about it for a second. We see these same ideas popping up everywhere. Miraculous births that signal someone special has arrived. Heroes who die and then come back to life. Laws that are handed down from a divine source. So what's the deal with all this repetition? Is it a sign of some single universal truth, or is there something else going on entirely? That's the puzzle we're exploring.
Okay, so if you see this pattern, how do you explain it? There are really two big ideas on the table. The first one is divine revelation. The idea that some transcendent being is revealing these truths to different people throughout history. The second, and this is the one we're really going to unpack, is cultural recycling. This is the theory that we humans just reuse and adapt the stories that have proven to work. Let's dig into that one.
So, to really get this whole cultural recycling model, you first got to stop thinking about these stories as just, well, stories. It's better to see them for what they are, a kind of narrative toolkit. These aren't just random fairy tales. They are functional, time-tested parts that get used again and again to build entire systems of belief and authority.
And just look at how these different parts work together. They're like interlocking gears. You have a miraculous birth, boom, that establishes authority right from the start. You have a dying and rising figure, well, that makes sure the authority lasts, even beyond death. Laws from a higher power, that creates a moral code that's hard to argue with. And the story of a chosen people, that builds an incredibly strong group identity. You put them all together, and you've got a coherent and super effective system.
And this brings us right to the main idea. Why recycle? Why not just invent something totally new? The answer, in a word, is efficiency. Trying to build a new religious movement from the ground up with completely original stories is just incredibly hard. It's way more effective to use narratives that people already recognize and understand.
This whole idea has a name. It's called narrative efficiency. And it makes a ton of sense when you think about it. Imagine you're starting a new movement. You have all these really complex ideas you need to get across. Who's in charge? What's moral? Why should people obey you? And you need to do it quickly. If you use story templates that your audience already knows, your claims become instantly understandable. You're basically speaking a language they're already fluent in.
This quote from our source material absolutely nails it. Originality in this context is a liability. Familiarity is an asset. Just let that sink in. In the world of building belief systems, being totally original can actually hurt you. If you introduce a concept that's too new, too alien, people might just tune out. But familiarity, that builds an instant bridge to your audience, and that makes it a huge strategic asset.
Now this is where things get even more fascinating. If religions are borrowing stories from each other, why don't they just say so? This next part is all about the sneaky way sacred stories evolve over time, all while claiming to be timeless and unchanged.
So how does this actually work? The process is called quiet adaptation. First, a movement borrows a useful, popular story from the culture around it. But, and this is the crucial part, it's never presented as a loner. It's reframed as a brand new divine revelation. The movement will talk a lot about its connection to ancient truths, while kind of hiding the fact that it just adapted something new. This lets the religion evolve and stay relevant, all while holding on to its claim of being this timeless, unchanging authority.
Okay, so let's put these two models right next to each other and see how they stack up. Which one does a better job of explaining the historical evidence we actually have? Is it divine revelation, or is it cultural recycling?
As you can see here, the two models predict totally different patterns. If sacred stories came straight from a divine source, you'd expect to see a lot of novelty, right? New, divergent ideas with each revelation. But that's not what the historical record shows us. Instead, what we see is convergence, the same patterns showing up over and over again. And that evidence strongly supports the idea that human cultures are just recycling and adapting what's familiar.
So here's the crucial point. When you actually analyze sacred stories historically, they act just like other human creations. They evolve, they get passed down, they're shaped by their environment. They don't look like these sudden interruptions from outside of history. They look like they're a product of it.
But this brings up another really important question. If these stories are just recycled artifacts, why are they so incredibly durable? Why do people hold on to them so tightly, even when their original context is a distant memory? Well, the answer seems to be the enormous social cost of letting go.
Giving up a sacred story isn't just some intellectual exercise, right? It's tied to your entire world. You could risk being pushed out of your community, losing your group identity. You might feel totally lost without a moral compass. And on a really deep level, it can threaten your whole sense of personal meaning. The stakes are just incredibly high, and that makes these narratives extremely resistant to change.
And this is a fundamental insight. The sacred isn't resistant to change by accident. It's conservative by design. These stories last because they provide stability for people and for groups. And in a chaotic world, stability is incredibly valuable. They're like anchors.
Now, it's really important to be clear about something. The goal of an analysis like this isn't to disprove anyone's belief. Not at all. It's more about, as the slide says, relocating where its meaning comes from, shifting our focus from the idea of revelation to the idea of inheritance.
So the ultimate takeaway here is this really profound shift in perspective. When you see these sacred stories as powerful, inherited human artifacts, you don't actually destroy their meaning. You just relocate it. You start to see them not as a supernatural broadcast, but as a testament to human creativity, to our deep need for community, and to our endless search for order and purpose in the universe.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question. If we accept that these stories are recycled for their social function, for stability, what does that say about us? What are the psychological forces, fear, the need to belong, the desire for certainty, that make people defend these inherited stories so fiercely, sometimes even when they themselves have doubts? Now that's a question for another explainer. Thanks for watching.